Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Chav Test, Bava Metzia 29. We're going to start on the last line of 28b that the Mishnah had discussed. What's the status if you find an object? If you find an object, are you allowed to use the object that you're finding while you're waiting to return it to the person? So this is a dispute between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon in our Mishnah. Rabbi Tarfon in our Mishnah says you can use the object, but because you're allowed to use it, lefikach, therefore, if it gets lost, you're responsible because since you're allowed to use it, you're like a somebody who's responsible for it. You have that privilege, and therefore, you're going to have to be responsible. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says you're not allowed to use it. Lefikach, therefore. If it's lost, and if it's lost, you're not responsible because you weren't allowed to use it. So you're getting no benefit from it. So therefore, you're just a shomer chinam, just an unpaid watchman. So the Gemara says on the bottom line on 28b, ad kanu pligi. So it seems that very clear that according to Rabbi Tarfon, who says you can use it, therefore you're responsible. Rabbi Kiva says you can't. They're only arguing about what would be the law in a case on the top of Chav Tes Amud Aleph, Kishin Ishtamish Ben, only where you're allowed to use it. And so therefore, since you're allowed to use it, you have reward from using it. So that's worth something. But if you weren't allowed to use it, everybody says you're not getting any benefit from it. And so therefore, you're not responsible. Meaning to say, if you're not allowed to use it, even Rabbi Tarfon would say, Rabbi Tarfon would even say that you're not responsible because since you wouldn't be allowed to lose it. But this is a contradiction to another idea we have, an opinion of Rav Yosef, which is known as the Pruta de Rav Yosef. This is a case we had in Bava Kama, Daf Nun Vav, where Rav Yosef says that if a person is watching an object, it's considered a shomer sachar, a paid watchman. If he finds an object and is watching it, why? Because since while he's watching that object, if a poor person would knock on his door, he wouldn't have to give that poor person bread, because he's involved in a different mitzvah. We have a concept, osik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. If you're involved in one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. Therefore, this person, since he's doing the mitzvah of watching the object, he's exempt from having to give that poor man the bread. And so therefore, he's getting a benefit, a monetary benefit by watching this object. So we see from here that our Mishnah seems to be contradicting this idea of Rav Yosef, because we're saying over here that the only reason why you're going to be responsible is because you're using it. But if you weren't using it, you wouldn't be responsible. It's a contradiction to Rav Yosef's idea, who says no matter what, you're responsible because of the mitzvah you're involved in. So back on the top of 29a, Rav Yosef. Isn't this a refutation of Rav Yosef? Then Rav Yosef said, Shomar Veda, somebody who finds a lost object and he's watching it. Rabba says, Kishomar Chinam. Rabba says, you're like an unpaid watchman. Whereas Rav Yosef says, Kishomer Sachar, you're like a paid watchman. Now our Mishnah seems to be contradicting that. So Rav Yosef would say, no, Bigneva Vaveda Koyama will plead Dechayev. No, he says, now everybody would say that you're a paid watchman here, and everybody would agree that if it would be loss or theft, that you'd be responsible. Where's the dispute between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva? Where we're talking about a case, our Mishnah is not referring to a case of loss and theft, which is what a shomer sachar, a paid watchman, is typically responsible for. We're talking about an accident by a borrower. Rabbi Tarfon savar, Sharle Rabbanu Shtamushe B'Gavayu. Rabbi Tarfon's of the position that the rabbis allowed you to use it, and so therefore, since the rabbis allow you to use it, therefore you're like a borrower. And so therefore, you're going to be responsible even for accidents. So Rabbi Akiva savar, Rabbi Akiva's in a position, rabbis are not allowing you to use it. Therefore, since the rabbis are not allowing you to use it, therefore you're not going to be considered like a borrower. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so Rabbi Akiva is saying you're not allowed to use it, therefore you're not a borrower, therefore you're not responsible for loss and theft. Why does Rabbi Akiva use this language? Why does the Mishnah have Rabbi Akiva using the language? Therefore, since you're not allowed to use it, you're not going to be responsible for loss and theft. Now, if you're going to say that the argument is by loss and theft, Rabbi Akiva, Omer lo yishtamish beh, and that's why it says in our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says you can't use it. Lefikach, therefore, im avdu, therefore, if it's lost, eno chayav b'achor yusan, you're not responsible. Because you might have said shomer sachar avi, because Rabbi Yosef, you might have said Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Yosef that he's a paid watchman, and you were responsible for loss and theft. So therefore, kamashmo, and therefore it has to teach us lefikach. But so therefore, that's to tell us. Therefore, you're not responsible. So therefore, hasha the amris lo yishtamish ben shomer sachar lo havi lo machayev b'gnei v'aveda. Therefore, it makes sense using the language of lefikach. Therefore, since we're saying that he's not a shomer sachar, therefore, since we're saying he's not allowed to use, he's not allowed to use it. He's not a shomer sachar because we don't hold like Rabbi Yosef. So therefore, he's not responsible for theft and loss. But if you want to say that everybody says that by loss and theft, Rabbi Akiva also says you're responsible, but because you're like a shomer sachar and keep pligi. And where do they argue? But owns in the shul, they're only arguing by a case of if you borrowed it, and it was an accident. Why does Rabbi Akiva have to say lefikach? It's so obvious that you're not responsible. If you're not allowed to use it, of course you're not responsible for an accident. So as Rashi says, why would you even think that he's responsible? They have to say he's not chayiv. So the Gemara says, how do we put the words of the Mishnah into the position of Rabbi Akiva? So the Gemara answers, Hachim Mibalei. So Hachim Mibalei Mishnah. It should have said, Gemara continues the question. Rabbi Akiva Omer lo yishtamish ben. It should have said Rabbi Akiva says you know how to use it. Excuse me. V'ana yadana, and I would know the kivan lo yishtamish ben Rav Shohavi, and I would know that since he's not allowed to use it, he's not considered a borrower. Ve'eno chayav v'achriyusan, and he's not responsible. So therefore, Afikach Rabbi Akiva Lamoi. Why does it need to say in the Mishnah Afikach Rabbi Akiva? So the Gemara explains. The reason is Mishum Lefikach to Rabbi Tarfon. So it's only using it because it says, therefore, according to Rabbi Tarfon, you're going to be chayav. So therefore, since it uses the language of Lefikach by Rabbi Tarfon, it uses it also by Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says, Lefikach to Rabbi Tarfon, Lamale. Why do we need to say the words Lefikach by Rabbi Tarfon? Meaning to say, it's obvious, if you're allowed to use it, obviously you're like a borrower, then therefore, of course, you're going to be responsible. Oh, so the Gemara says, well, hachikamer, this is what it means. Kimin de sharle rabbanu shlemushe begavayo. No, so the chiddush by Rabbi Tarfon is since the rabbis allowed you to use it, it's as though you used it. Kimadish tamish begavayo dami. It's as though you used it, v'chayev v'achriyusan, and you're responsible. So yeah, so fine. So the Gemara says, but we have a different problem with your attempt to put this position into the Mishnah. You're saying that the Mishnah is talking about the case of a borrower, and therefore you're responsible for accidents. But the Mishnah doesn't say you're responsible for accidents. The Mishnah says you're responsible for theft and for loss, not for accidents. So the Gemara says, it says you're responsible for an Aveda. Geneva Aveda is typically what the Shomer Sachar is responsible, whereas the borrower is responsible even for accidental loss. So how do you fit that with our Mishnah? Gemara says, well, that's not an issue. We have a way around that. We're on the top of 29b. Kidder Rabba, like Rabba taught, that Rabba says that actually sometimes the words Gneva Veda can refer to an accident, not just loss and theft. It could be a complete accident. How so? The Amarava Nignevu, what does it mean stolen? It doesn't mean that you were pickpocketed in Times Square. That would be something that a Shomer Sachar would be responsible. Here it's talking about where Nignevu Ballistim Mizuyim, where like armed robbers are basically held you up, and that's considered to be a total accident. And Avdu, when it's lost, is Shetavha Sfina Sobayam, that your ship sank at sea. These are total accidents. So not all Geneva Aveda is something that only a Shomer Sachar, not a Shomer Sachar, a pay watchman, is not responsible for all Geneva Aveda. He's only responsible for the ones that are not a total accident. But the Amish is talking about the ones that are a total accident. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So now Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that the halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon. It was like Rabbi Tarfon, i.e., that since you're allowed to use it, you're going to be responsible. If you find an object, since you're allowed to use it, you're responsible for accidental loss, which is an incredible burden, but to place upon the person who finds an object. But that's the halacha. So And that's what Rabbi Huda says in the name of Shmuel. The halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon, but it's even though the Gemara says that, it's not clear from the Rishonim that that's how we paskin. So Bei Rachba, in the house of Rachba, Havle Hani Zuzi Diasmi, there's money that belonged to some orphans. So the orphans, basically the situation is that the orphans had some money and they used it as a deposit with Rachba. So Asla came to Rav Yosef, and so Rachba came to Rav Yosef. He said, "Ma'ulish tamushe begevayu. Can I basically use this money? Can I borrow the money that they deposited with me? Can I use it?" So I'm like, Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, Rabbi Tarfon, also like Rabbi Tarfon, you're allowed to use it. So I'm like, Abaye, Rav Idmar, Rav Chabal, Rav Huna, Shanu El B'Dmei, Aveda. So Abaye says to his Rabbi Rav Yosef, is this really the case that he can use it based upon that? But didn't we learn that Rabbi Chabal said in the name of Rav Huna that when do we say this, that you're allowed to use it only with the money of a lost object? That basically that you took this lost object and you sold it, and now you have the money. That's when we say you can use the money that's with you. Because why? Because in that situation, all the tarchba, because the Torah recognizes that you worked so hard on it, so therefore we're going to allow you to borrow the money. But if it's just the money that you find straight out from the lost object, that the rabbis are not going to allow you to borrow. Vahani, and this money that he's deposited with you is kemos avedo dami. It's like the money of a lost object. And so therefore we shouldn't be allowed to use it. Amrei zil lo shavkuli de ashrucha. He said, you know what? Rav Yosef says to Rachba, my students, they're not letting me allow you to do it. And Rav Yosef, we know throughout Shas, his student was Abaye, but also Rav Yosef forgot a lot of his learning, and Abaye was always reminding him. And so Rav Yosef was going to take direction many times from his student Abaye. Says the Mishnah, Matzah Svarim Korban Echad Shloshim Yom. So if you find a Svarim, a Sefer today, we know it's a book, but here it means a scroll. They didn't have books, so he said, find a scroll, and now the scroll, if you don't use it, it will get ruined. But if you use it too often, it would also get ruined. So you have to open it up and read from it once every 30 days. If you don't know how to read it, roll it. Now here too, I just want to stop and say, this is also a Musar Haskell. If you have a book in your house, you open up the book. Open up the book. Don't just have the books lying in your house. Cole is never opening them. Open up the books of your house. Read it every 30 days. If you don't know how to read it, roll it. But you can't start for the first time to read it with a book that you found, because then you'll ruin it because you'll hold it too tightly. Don't allow somebody else to read with him, because then you have like two people pulling at it and then it'll break. Let's say you found the blanket. You have to shake out the blanket, spread it out in your house once every 30 days. But you're only allowed to do that you shake it out and you spread it out for the blanket's needs. But you don't take it out when the company's coming, so they see, oh, look, he's got such fancy blankets. No, that's for yourself. Silver, copper utensils. You can use them for their own needs. But you're not allowed to use them for a long time, because that'll get them ruined. Let's say you have gold and glass utensils. Well, those you could leave in the ground, so you're not allowed to touch them because they could break. Until Elijah comes. And now we have a qualification on all the laws of Shavas Aveda, of returning lost object. Let's say you find a bag or something that he wouldn't typically take. You shouldn't touch it. Don't take it. Because, as we'll see, that's going to be not according to his honor. Rashi says, Davar Shegenayu, it's disrespectful to him. So Adam Chashafu, he's a distinguished person. Vein Darko Ito Kupa Shalo Lachnisa Min Achutz Labayis Shamor Lo Yito. So if it's not his way to take it from outside and bring it into a guarded house, he shouldn't take it. And he's going to be exempt from the law of returning lost object. from the position of the verse that says V'hisalamta. Hold on one second. Now you shall hide from these situations. Hold on one second. Okay, so now says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel Amotzi Tefillin B'Shuk. Let's say somebody finds tefillin in the marketplace. Sham Demeyan Umanichan altar. Then you could sell them immediately and buy a new and take the money and keep it until the guy comes. Masar Ravina challenges this. Not to Svarim Korban Echad Shloshim Yom. If you find scrolls, you read from them once every 30 days. Remaino Yodel Akros go on, which means go on, you roll them. Go on in. You can't sell the scrolls. You have to roll them, take care of them. Amar Abaye. So Abaye says tefillin is different. Vei bar chabo mishkach shlichi. Svarim lo shlichi. So he says tefillin, you can go into the scribe's shop. His name was Bar Chabo, and he always has a pair of tefillin to sell. So even if you sell and you get the money, the guy will always be able to buy it. But the scrolls were rare, and so therefore you can't just sell the scrolls. Let's say you borrow a Torah scroll, you can't lend it out to somebody else. You open up and read from it. Open up and read from it as long as you don't start a new topic, because as you said, that ruins it. And nobody else is allowed to read with him, because then you'll ruin it. Somebody leaves it for Torah as a deposit. You have to roll it every 12 months. Post Lavakoro, bow, and you open it and read it. In Bishvilo, if it's for him himself, Sacho Asar. But for the person himself, you're not allowed to open it. Simcha says, Bechadash, with a new Torah scroll, Shloshim Yom, every 30 days. B'Yashan, Shnei Masar Chodesh, every 12 months. Shabbat and Yaakov says, Echadzev, Shnei Masar Chodesh. Whether it's new or old, every 12 months you roll it. So now the Gemara says, let's analyze this price. Amar Mara, Shol Sefer Torah Mechavero, if you borrow a Torah scroll, you can't lend it out. Well, my year you Sefer Torah. What does that have to do with a Torah scroll? I feel called Milay Nami. You can't lend out anything. Number Shlakish Khan Shana Rebbe, Aina Shol, one who borrows something is not allowed, Rishayla Ashio. Veina Socher, Rishayla Askir, one who rents can't rent it out. And if you borrow, you can't lend it out. So why do you have to tell us it's about the Torah scroll? So the Gemara says, Sefer Torah Tzrichoi. No, we need it about the Torah scroll. Mal de Tema, you might have said, Nichle wa Inish, the Tiyave mitzvah b'mamona. You might have said a person would want the mitzvah to be done with his money. Kamash Malon, he doesn't want the mitzvah to be done with his money. Why? Yeah, sure, he'd want the mitzvah to be done with his money. But in this case, they're going to ruin the Torah scroll. It's not going to be, it could tear, it could get ruined. So he's not, and also I can tell you from personal experience, sometimes people borrow Torah scrolls and then they don't roll it back to the right place. So then the Gemara says, Kamash Malon. Post of the Korabo. So if you borrow the Torah scroll, you can open it and read from it. Well, why else would he borrow it? Of course, he borrowed the Torah scroll to read from it. The says, no, we need that cause safe for the next cause. As long as he doesn't study a new topic from it. One who deposits the Torah scroll, he has to roll it every 12 months. Post of the Korabo. So Gemara says, what do you mean he opens it and reads from it? Maya vidasa, and if he wants to post the karbo, if he wants to, he can open it and read from it. The Gemara understands that he's allowed to use it even for his own needs. So the Gemara says, but Maya vidata, what's he doing with the Torah scroll? Meaning to say, why can he read from it? He's a shomer. He's not a borrower. He's a shomer. He's a watchman. He's not allowed to use it for himself. And then it says, and then it says, if it's for himself, he opens it, it's prohibited. But then you just say, you can open it and read from it. The Gemara says, okay, imkashu, this is what it means. Imkashu golo, if when he rolls it, once he's already rolling it, he could read from it. That's matar. But if he opens it for himself, that's usher, that's prohibited. Sumcha says, Chadash, Simcha says if a new Torah scroll every 30 days, he has to roll it. B'Yashan, An old Torah scroll, Shnei Matzah Chodesh, every 12 months. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Echad Zev, Shnei Matzah Chodesh, every 12 months for both new and old. So the Gemara says, well, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, I'm in Tanakama. What's the difference between Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov and Tanakama? They both say to roll it every 12 months. And Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Omer Echad Zev, Shloshim Yom. So the Gemara changes Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, he says roll it every 30 days. But you're not allowed to study from the beginning. You're not allowed to study a new topic, and nobody else could read with it. The Gemara says, "Viraminho," but we have a contradictory source. Lo yikra parsha v'yashana v'lo yikar bo parsha v'yitargim v'yiftach bo yoter migimel dapin v'lo yikar bo shlosha b'nei adam mikrach echad. So we have a different source that says that that when you are watching this Torah, or this Torah was deposited with you, you're not allowed to read a passage again. You can't do it twice. And you also can't leave it open long enough to read the passage and translate it. And you can't open more than 3 pages at a time. And you can't have 3 people reading at one time. But that proves that you can have 2 people reading it at the same time. And we just said you can't have 2 people. So if it's one topic, you can't have 2 people. If it's 2 topics, you can't have 3 people, because the concept is more than one person reading the same page is going to perhaps endanger the Torah, that they'll each pull on it to get it closer, and that could rip. Find the blanket, you shake it out every 30 days. Gemara says, you mean to say that shaking out a blanket is good for it? So if somebody has a weaver in his house, then he could shake out his garment, call yom, because don't worry about it, your weaver will make you a new one. Meaning to say, shaking it out is bad. So the Gemara says, yeah, every day it's bad for it. But if you do it once every 30 days, it's good for it. Well, it depends. If it's one person doing it, then you could shake it out. But if it's 2 people, don't do it. With your hand, you could do it. With your stick, don't do it. It'll ruin it. No, one is with wool, one is with cotton. Presumably with wool, it's okay, but with cotton, it's no good. Or you could say it's the opposite. With wool, it will tear, but with cotton, you don't have to worry about it. So then the Gemara now says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kasa de Charshin, no Kasa de Pashin. Rabbi Yochanan says, better off drinking a cup of magic, of sorcery, which we know is a problem, which we know is prohibited to do anything with magic. I'd rather you drink a cup of magic or sorcery than a cup of warm water. Melo Amran, and when did Rabbi Yochanan say this? When do we say warm water is bad? If it's metal utensil. It's a pottery utensil, you don't have to worry. And the metal utensil, he only didn't say it Ella Savitz, where it never was boiled, that it was never boiling. But if it eventually was boiled, but we have no problem. Where he only says we never put some herbs in it. If you put herbs in it, there's no problem. Why does Rabbi Yochanan have to tell us drink a magician's cup, but not warm water cup? We needed the great Rabbi Yochanan to teach us this idea. So I was thinking like this, Tasa de Tarsha and well Tasa de Pasha, because Rabbi Yochanan is telling us, okay, the Charshan, the magician, is wrong. And at least that person has some passion in their life. That's better than the Casa de Pasha, the guy who's drinking the warm water, the tepid cup. The guy doesn't have a heartbeat, no pulse. I mean, the guy doesn't care about anything. At least if you're passionate, we can eventually move your passion to the right thing. But if you don't care about anything, what are you? Your existence is for nothing in this world. Casa de Pasha, you don't care about anything? Don't drink from a warm water cup. That's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. So now we say, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, somebody's father left him a lot of money, and you want to lose your money, meaning to say, he's telling us, I'll give you a good way to lose your money. Yobash bigdei pishtan, wear linen clothing, and use a lot of glass utensils, v'yiskor polim, and hire workers, valuation be mine, and don't sit with them. Yobash b'kli pishtan, what does it mean to wear linen clothing? B'kotna rumisa, that's talking about Roman cotton. Mishtamish b'kli techuchis, what does it mean to use a glass utensil? Bezugisa chiverta, with a white glass. V'yiskar poem v'yeshev, man hire workers and don't sit with them. Targuma, they explain that beture the nafit beture, meaning to say that this refers to workers who are in the mountains. The nafish psaidayu, because that's going to cause a lot of money to lose. Basically, Rashi says that this refers to the oxen who are beturim, excuse me, not the mountains, but the oxen. Rashi says that they're watching the oxen in the vineyards, and you let a bull loose in a china shop, it could do a lot of damage if nobody's watching it. So you let the bulls loose in the vineyards, it's going to cause a lot of problems. All right, we'll stop the recording here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address these questions at this time.